What's up? It's Emmett Douglas from Blindside Sports. Welcome back to another episode, and today's a very exciting episode. The guest I have with me, you can hear him every weekday from 12 to 4 doing national updates for Doug Gottlieb and Cavino and Rich. You hear him Sundays 2 to 5 Pacific time, 5 to 8 Eastern time with 6-year NFL tight end George Reister. You can hear him on the I Want Your Flex podcast along with Mike Harmon. If you don't know already, it's Dan Beyer at Dan Beyer on Fox on Twitter. Dan, I think, I'm kind of surprised I was able to get you with how busy you are. You're a father with a young kid doing, your show, your updates, your podcast. Aren't you like the boss of the anchors too? Like you do it all, man. Welcome to the show.
Emmett,
Dan who runs the place.
To be with you.
That's what it is. Like Cavino and Rich. Dan who runs the place.
Just for clarification purposes, Emmett, Big Mike does not run the place.
I know. That's Scott Shapiro.
First, but it's good to be with you. It is busy. It's always busy at Fox Sports Radio. Yes.
You still all right? Yeah. So, it's always busy at Fox Sports Radio. I thought you were gonna say something there, so I was kind of like, oh, well, and then you didn't. But let's go on to the first question here. You've worked on the Doug Gottlieb show since the Doug Gottlieb show originated back in 2017. You've worked on J Moore Sports. You've worked on the Gormans. You've worked all over the place. And there's one character that you work with 5 days a week. He's on the board. He wasn't there today, but John Ramos. This guy, FSR legend. I mean, you can't disagree with that. He's done a lot of funny things on the air and had a lot of cool moments. What's your favorite John Ramos story?
Oh, there are a lot of them. I could give you a few because, Emmett, we try to bring them up on the air as much as we can. And you may have heard about the 10-minute mac and cheese.
Where, I think Lee DeLapp told that one on here, actually.
Yep. That's one. You heard about Kitty Boo.
Yeah.
That was John's and Suzanne's cat, unfortunately, that is no longer with us thanks to the neighbor's German Shepherd.
Wow.
But my favorite one, and there's so many good stories, and John's such a good guy. My favorite one, because he is such a good guy, but John's competitive, is that the catcher in a softball game that he was coaching of like 12-year-old girls was not hiding her signs. And so John, as the third base coach, was actually stealing the signs from a 12-year-old girl playing.
He's like
catcher.
The Astros.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
He took the competitive edge, which was it's so funny, and we laughed about it. But he's like, hey, she's got to protect the signs. You got to learn. And so he was tipping the pitches to his teammates as the third base coach, which I just find hilarious.
Oh yeah, that's pretty great. Other honorable mentions for John Ramos are obviously the John Ramos show, which we'll get to that in a minute because you're kind of the creator of that. And one thing, quickly here too, is you're the mastermind of game shows. I mean, when you're in for Jason Smith with Mike Harmon and Alex Tyshirt over there, you have the Family Feud. You do Easy as 1, 2, 3, 4 with George Reister. Whenever whoever's the fill-in host with you, if you're in for Doug Gottlieb, you guys always come up with something. You are the mastermind of game shows. How did that happen? Where did that come from?
So I do have a love of game shows, but I will say this: the creativity of that. I've always loved game shows. So that is just the flat line of you can start it from there. But working with J Moore, just completely opened my eyes to having fun. And I think, Emmett, there are so many shows and radio shows that have games that truly want to find a winner.
Yes.
None of my games are designed for someone to actually win. Now the participants, like George Reister, wants to win every single week.
Oh yeah, he goes 10 for 10. That's his goal every week.
Yes. But the real goal in that game, for example, is to get everybody involved, to hear from different voices, to hear from Iowa Sam, to hear from Monty Bolaños, to hear from Bo Benson, our producer. Like I want to hear from them as well. It's a better show that way.
Yep.
And so it's never about getting questions right. It also does allow us to talk about maybe the week that was, maybe because I do try to, at least with the Sunday show, I try to tie it into stories. But when we do it on the weekdays, like if I'm filling in for Doug and we have a John Ramos game, 10 out of 10 times I'm just trying to put together a funny game.
Yeah.
I don't care who wins. I don't care who loses. I don't care how many points are scored. It is supposed to be for a laugh, to make you laugh.
Yep.
And that's usually the goal of it. And so I kind of use like the game show format to kind of have fun and to have a laugh, but it's never really actually about the game.
Yep, for sure. A couple things on that. I mean, obviously we have Ben Maller, who's probably the most competitive game show player on the network. And then the other thing too is I remember you were in, I believe it was like the week of Thanksgiving, around the holiday time, for Jason Smith, and you did the Family Feud, as usual, as you and Mike Harmon do every time you fill in with him. And Alex Teichert, the great Alex Teichert, FSR legend, has his own podcast, talking about anime and all that. He is not a sports fan. If you guys don't know, Teichert doesn't know a thing about sports. I mean, he knows some stuff, but he's not like me or Dan or, Doug Gottlieb, where he's like a fanatic. And you asked, I don't remember the question. It might've been a baseball or a football question. And Ethan Miller, who's one of the editors and producers, he's been on here, does the overnights. He had a Philly guy, and it was either football or baseball. That's what I'm saying. I don't remember the exact, question, but Teichert says the 76ers because of the shirt that you saw Ethan wearing. That was funny because it wasn't even a basketball question.
The pass in the feud when we play it,
he doesn't even use it half the time. It's weird.
No, and it was solely put in for Alex. Like that's where it was. Where if Alex didn't know, and Emmett, the funny thing is we started doing the feud when Mike and I did Sunday mornings together.
I remember that as the fantasy show. You and him, and Low and Cron carrying every Sunday morning, getting fantasy players across the world ready for their matchups. Yeah, it was. I remember that show.
Yeah, and Alex was a part of that show as well. He would come in. I think maybe he would come in mid shift or whatever. But he was there in the morning at times, and so we would utilize him there with that. And then it just works. Now that he's with Jason and Mike at night. So when I'm sitting in there, it works perfectly. But I love Alex. I still call him the Big A because that's what we called him on the Sunday morning show. But yeah, again, another perfect example where it's not about getting the answer right. It's about having a laugh and having fun.
Yes, there you go. We'll come back to Fox Sports Radio here in a couple minutes because I've all of the people I've had on this show, many people. We've done a lot of episodes here. I've lost count. We're probably in the 70s, 80s. You're the first Seahawks fan I've besides maybe an IRL friend that I've had on this show. So Dan, we have to chop up some Seahawks football, man. What are your expectations for this offseason? What are you doing with Geno? Is there any moves you want us to make, and who do you think we're drafting?
Yeah. I honestly, I mean, I have two trains of thought. And I know Geno Smith had a great year, and by all accounts, the locker room is great. I just don't know if he's the guy that you want to pay $30 million to.
There you go.
And it's more of a question of what we've seen in the NFL of even we don't know if Lamar Jackson wants so much guaranteed money, but even the numbers the Ravens are throwing at him, some people may balk at and say, well, I don't know if he's worth it or not. I believe that Lamar Jackson is worth the amount that the Ravens are throwing at him. He just wants more guaranteed money. The point though is your quarterback that difference maker enough to make up for the shortcomings that you're going to have to deal with salary wise for the amount that you pay?
Yes.
And while Geno isn't a top level sort of guy, I also think, when are you going to be drafting in the top 5 again?
Exactly.
And so
I mean, the odds of Russ being bad with Denver 2 years in a row is just, I mean, as much as I would like it to happen, as horrible as it is to say, it's probably not going to happen. I don't think they're going to be like, a top 5 pick again. But yeah, you're right on that part.
And the thing is this is actually, they don't even have Denver's picks anymore next year because they used their first last year because they didn't have a first from the Jamal Adams deal. Man.
Don't get me started on that because I like it. I like Jamal Adams. And like at the time, I was like, "Oh, this finally!" And then he can't even stay healthy, so it's like, "Oh man, now we're wasting all this money and wasting all these draft picks for him to only play that 1 year." And I didn't think he played the full season either.
No, he played a half of a game this past year, and then was lost for the year. Was hurt in that game against the Broncos. Yep. So
it got hurt against the Titans last year. I believe that's what
it hasn't worked out.
No. Which sucks because he's a great safety.
2 or 3, right?
Him. Yep. So yeah, I think Jamal's where you're drafting a quarterback. That's what it sounds like in the top 5.
I think that you do. I really think that you have to. And
are you
if it doesn't work out,
I'd
rather put it. I actually do think that that's the apple of their eye. I think that CJ, if they had to draft a quarterback, I think it would probably be Bryce Young. I think that CJ Stroud's the best out of all of them. I like him better than Bryce Young. I may be biased, but that's just how I feel about him. But I think if they wanted to get Bryce Young, they would. The problem is I don't think that they're going to. I think that I don't think it's worth it to them to trade up to that spot. And I actually think that John Schneider probably wants to even get more picks. If there is a quarterback at 5 that somebody wants and the Seahawks aren't taking, it's a perfect opportunity for them to get another number 1 next year and then try to trade out of that spot. So, I guess depending on who would be there at 5 for them, Emmett, would be my answer would be dependent on who was there on whether they should draft a quarterback or not. If it's Will Levis, a lot of people are mixed on Levis. I'm not a huge fan on him. I would probably rather them trade the pick than draft Levis. But if CJ Stroud or Bryce Young happen to be there, which they probably won't, but if they are, I'd rather have them, make the pick there.
Yeah, I think, I just like when we actually have our top 5 picks because that's the one thing that Schneider does is when we have a first, he likes to trade down. And I like your idea of, a trading it to a team who needs a quarterback because the difference is like, from this year to years before is this is a top 5 pick. Years past, we've had like the 20th pick and he makes that to like 27 or a couple seconds. He does what he has to do. So if there's a quarterback on that board, I actually really like your idea of trading that pick because with the way the quarterback class is this year, Dan, people are willing to pay for, the quarterback of the future because it's a stacked class. I mean, there's rumors of even the Houston Texans trading up just 1 draft spot to the Chicago Bears and drafting a quarterback. I mean, if I'm the Seahawks, I really, maybe I'm looking at a quarterback. Maybe I'm looking at a developmental guy who can sit behind Geno Smith for a little bit because Geno Smith's 31 years old. We don't know if paying him long term is going to be the right thing for us. So you franchise tag Geno, and that's what it looks like Schneider's going to do. He said that yesterday. He kind of no commented, kind of danced around it. So that's probably what's going to happen. Geno's getting the franchise tag. And then maybe you find a quarterback that can sit behind Geno and you can learn with Pete Carroll because let me say this. Pete Carroll's getting older. We don't know how long he's going to be, a coach for. So you got to have that, quarterback ready to go. And I'd rather him learn behind Pete than a new head coach. So I think the window's soon if you really want to take a young guy and develop him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if Evan, if you feel this way, but the point you make about Schneider is one that sits in the forefront of my head. When have they traded up for a guy in the first round?
Never.
Like they don't. No, they'll do it in the second round. They'll trade up, get a pick, get DK Metcalf. Yep. They'll make that trade. But they haven't done it in the first round. And in fact, they've taken guys that we haven't even thought were first rounders multiple times.
Yeah, like LJ Collier back in 2019. You had I didn't expect us to take Rashad Penny the year before that. And then there's just a bunch of them. They're really weird. They draft like kind of bad in the first round, but once you get to that third round, it's bread and butter. Like Tariq Woolen's a late round pick. He's good. He's crazy. So yeah, the Seahawks are that's their bread and butter, the late round picks. You can't forget
Emmett,
either. Russell Wilson was a third-round pick.
Sure, but when they took James Carpenter in the first round at the NFL draft, they panned to Nick Saban, who was his college coach, and Nick Saban said, "Wow." So like Nick Saban didn't even think his own player was a first-round pick, and the Seahawks, ended up drafting him in that spot. So that's the one thing about with this spot at number 5 is just I hope they don't take someone that is not projected in the top 10 or a top 5 pick.
I think they're kind of starting to realize that they're like messing up these first round picks, because I mean that Charles Cross, the tackle they picked last year at number 9, was a pretty safe pick. I mean you have to build that offensive line. I really like the pick, and now though that you have all your picks back, you're not really paying other teams your draft picks. You can afford to go and get a pretty solid offensive line later in that draft and focus on positional guys throughout the first couple rounds. I mean, the Seahawks are set up so great. Nobody expected them to be good last year, and it was kind of like a reverse. The Seahawks were good. No one expected them to be good. People were poo-pooing me for saying the Seahawks could get 6 wins. And then you got the Broncos, who people thought were Super Bowl contenders, or they're going to make the playoffs. And, well, I mean, now we have the 5th pick. So, I mean, it was a weird season last year. It really was.
If you would have said, a year ago or after the Wilson pick, you would have said the Seahawks have number 5 and number 20. You would have said, okay, that makes sense because number 20 will be the Broncos pick and 5 will be the Seahawks pick. But... Exactly. That's exactly my point. Emmett Douglas alongside Dan Beyer on Blindside Sports. If you want to show some love to the show, make sure to leave a like. Follow me on Twitter at EmmettNosi04. You can follow Dan at Dan Beyer on Fox. You can check out the I Want Your Flex podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to hear him on the weekends, just type in Fox Sports Radio and look for Dan Beyer and George Reister. It should be on the Sunday shows. And actually, you were out. It was Brian Noe last week, so they have to scroll a while. But just tune in 2 to 5 on Sundays, and you'll hear Dan. You've worked with Doug Gottlieb now, as we said earlier, for years. And Doug he's had a lot of very interesting takes. He's done a lot of, cool things on the show. And you guys have fun over there with your segments like, the Midway, the Gambler, Game Time, the Press. Now on the podcast, You're Annoying with Jason and Ramos. So what's the coolest thing you've done working with Doug Gottlieb over the past 5-6 years? Well, it's funny because all of those games you mentioned, none of them were my brainchild. So a couple were what Doug brought over from CBS Sports. Some were, Jason Stewart's, thoughts. So it's cool. It's cool to also be a part of those, in the other, collaborative aspect of the show. There have been a lot of cool things we've done with Doug. Like we've gone on Super Bowl, Super Bowl remotes. We've had good times. We've been to the Breeders' Cup. Doug and I were in Kentucky this past fall, doing shows there. And that's, you
guys get to go to the training camps too, the Chargers and Rams. That's also cool.
That's what I was gonna say. That is the fun time where you kind of Doug's got a busy schedule, especially in the winter with college basketball. He's calling games in different cities, so he's not always in studio. But the training camp is kind of the opportunity for us to kind of kick our feet up, have some fun, be on location. And so those are always neat. And I think I think even if you listen to those shows and how they go, they're probably different than what we normally do Monday through Friday. But I would say, and I'm glad that you were, that you knew where I was going, but the training camp shows are always a highlight for me.
Oh yeah. Cause you like to go out there and kind of do the stuff. I mean, you're a big golf guy. So I think you've done on airs at like golf courses, correct?
Yeah. We used to go to Torrey Pines and do remotes there. We'd play in the Pro-Am. That was a lot of fun. It's fun on a day-to-day basis for sure, but it's neat to have some of those perks as well, to go along with the gig. Yep.
Now you obviously don't do overnights, but there's still some crazy stuff that can happen. And most of the crazy stuff goes down on, the Ben Maller show or Bernie, whoever's doing the weekend overnights, because the callers. But you've worked a lot. You've been at FSR for 15 years now. So
17.
17. Yeah. Wow. What's the craziest thing that's happened while you guys are trying to do a show or you're trying to do an update? Like, What's happened? I know. I mean, I'm sure, like Rob G shut down the network a while ago. Like, is there anything that level that you've had, or
Nothing to that level. And I actually used to do weekend overnights when I first came to Fox. I would actually be on Saturday night to Sunday morning from 11 until 6. So I know that shift very well. I would stop at the local CVS beforehand and pick up some gummy bears and some snacks to hold me through the night. But so I've done the overnight shift. And
was Ben Maller hosting when you were on the overnight shift?
yeah, there were a lot of different hosts during that time as well. Actually, when Ben used to do the overnights as well, I used to cover college football for Fox, and I would call in on the road at times. And the running joke, it's gone on for, I mean, I am going on my 18th year at Fox, but this is probably a 15, 16-year-old joke where I brought donuts back from Jacksonville, Florida, and I brought him to LA, and Ben never came and picked him up, and he blames me that I never brought him to the studio. And so these donuts that I picked up at a Dunkin' Donuts for him just ended up sitting in my suitcase, and then I'm sure I probably had some of them. But yeah,
you could have left that in the studio, and that would have been gone in seconds.
Yeah, in seconds. And Ben always says I'm the guy that carried the ball to the 1 yard line, but couldn't cash into the end zone. But hey, you know what I say? I did all the work. He's the goal line finisher. He's the Marcus Allen, leaping over the top. Yep. He should have come and got the donuts.
He's like a 2020 Marshawn Lynch in Seattle, just there to score a red zone touchdown.
Yes,
you can't do it. But Marshawn did. So there's your difference.
Yeah. So those were fun. There's been we were there one morning when an earthquake happened about a mile. The epicenter was about a mile from the studio.
Oh, wow.
And it was I think it was about like a 3.5 or a 4. And it shook. Like the drawers that were unlocked in my studio all slid out. Street lights were waving because it was so close to us. I've been on the air when there have been high-speed chases going by the studio.
Oh, those are legendary. Like Jason Smith, he really gets distracted by those. I love the live chase coverage on Fox Sports Radio.
Yeah, so those things have happened as well. John Ramos had kidney stones.
On the board, right? Like he was on the board and it hit him right then and there.
It hit him during my update. I looked up and John was there. I did my update and all of a sudden he's gone and they've taken him to the emergency room. So
did somebody take him, or did
a Ramos connected story?
Did someone from the network drive him, or do you have to okay, that's good.
I thought Big Mike may have done it. I think Big Mike may have taken him, but I'm not entirely sure. But John was.
You lose your tech producer in like 10 seconds. I mean, that's kidney stones. I mean, they're brutal. Thankfully, I've never had them. I'm too young. I don't know if you have. They just don't. They don't sound fun. There's been a couple kidney stone stories on this podcast before, so there you go. John Ramos, and he still. I mean, that still gets brought up on air now, where he's like kind of fell over the board in pain, and unfortunately, he had to leave. And I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure that was crazy behind the scenes stuff for you guys trying to figure out who's running the board till the next board doc comes on. I mean, man, that's a crazy one. I'm sure you had some like editor guy who didn't know anything about the board, just making sure whoever was on air was on air. You have to go to break. Oh, okay. I guess we do that. What button?
Evan, I don't even know what we did. I can't even remember. I don't even know how we got through it, but we somehow did.
Yeah, that's a radio behind the scenes story. I mean, there's a bunch of them. I mean, like Rob G shutting down the network, John Ramos having kidney stones in the middle of your update. Like that's when it started. Then Bershinger, I Want Your Flex producer, locked himself out of the Twitter account, your FSR Twitter account on the Ben Maller show, and that's where he got the name Keep Trying Ryan. So a lot of weird stuff's happened over the years, Dan. Why don't we go back over to the NFL offseason real quick here? What is your spiciest take on the NFL offseason? I think we're having some technical difficulties here as Dan Beyer is joining us on Blindside Sports. Emmett Douglas here. Get me on Twitter at EmmettNocy04. You can follow my Instagram at Blindside Sports 00, TikTok, or no, Blindside Sports 7. I changed it. And then you can go follow that over there. I'll put that in the comments. Dan, do we have you back? Gremlins are getting him here. So we're talking NFL offseason here. There's a lot to go on here this offseason. I mean, obviously we have all these Aaron Rodgers news.
Emmett, do you got me now?
There we go. I think you cut out there for a second.
Sorry about that. Our weather's wacky out here.
Well, I saw a video earlier. Isn't it snowing in SoCal? Like, or wasn't it earlier? Like, I think
yes.
like it. Maybe an hour away from the studio, it was snowing. Like that.
Yes, that's where I live.
Wow.
That's where I'm headed. So I apologize. It's windy, it's cold, but yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, you guys can't handle that. I'm sure all the SoCal residents like John Ramos, who he's at a fast pitch tournament today. Is that where he was? You said on Covino and Rich.
You know what? And like we always like to have fun with John, but John's passion is coaching. And he has done it for years. And whether it be soccer, whether it be, baseball, whether it be softball, he loves to do it. And he got a great opportunity to get back in the game because he's coached his kids. He's coached his daughter, he's coached his son, and an opportunity came up for him to do some JV softball coaching and be the head coach of the team in South Pasadena. And so, he took advantage of it. So it's really cool that he's able to do that. But I think they had a game today, so that's why he wasn't in.
There you go. He's great. So I'm sure he's really struggling in the cold right now. As he's a Southern California guy, been in LA for years now. So I'm sure he's struggling with that, with the cold weather. But back to the topic here, the NFL offseason. There's a lot of crazy stuff projected to go on, like Aaron Rodgers. Where's he gonna be? Derek Carr, where's he going to be at quarterback? Who's going to get drafted? What is your spiciest take that's going to happen in the NFL offseason?
Oh, spiciest take. Gosh. I think that the Aaron Rodgers Packers divorce, he's not going to be a Packer next year. I know that's not spicy. Other people have had that, have had that same sort of thought. But I don't see him. I think that he is the story.
Yes.
And I think that I don't see. I mean, there are enough signs to show us. I mean, he still hasn't made a decision whether he wants to play or not. I mean, like that. At the time of this, taping, and the time of the broadcast that we're doing this. But I don't. There's not one thing, Emmett, that has happened this offseason that made me think, maybe he will be in Green Bay. Yeah, not one thing.
Agreed. And the one thing that this is the difference between last year and the year before that is there's rumors that the Packers are they're listening to offers for Aaron Rodgers now. I think the Packers are a little bit fed up with it. I mean, their salary cap is kind of it's non-existent with the Aaron Rodgers contract. So I think they're maybe trying to kind of reset. They think, this is a time we start with Jordan Love now, and they're moving on, the end of an era out there in Green Bay. I think that's completely fair. Where do you think he's ending up, though? Raiders?
I think it's going to end up being, that's the best option in the for him with Davante Adams.
Yes.
I do think, I honestly, I know that Jets talk is out there, and then there's, I do think it would be really intriguing. I mean, I really do. I mean, the way that they are set up. The problem is
New York media would be on him too, though.
Yeah, but I also don't know as well of, just how important Davante Adams is, to him. And I think he's pretty important. And so I think Davante Adams is playing a role, and it will play a role in this as well. So I think that the Raiders just seems like the natural fit.
Yeah, I agree with you there, even though there's some also reports saying maybe the Raiders aren't going to do it. I mean, I think that's the one that makes sense. I mean, Aaron Rodgers in New York, it doesn't seem right to me. And then there's people, Aaron Rodgers could end up in a Titans uniform. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think the Titans are close to success. I mean, Derrick Henry's not getting any younger. There's rumors of trading him. He might. I think the Bills are going to make a strong offer for Derrick Henry. I think that's going to happen. So I think you're completely right. I think it's going to be the Raiders. I think he's done in Green Bay. I think we're both in agreement on that. it's going to be interesting to see what the Raiders have to give up for Aaron Rodgers. But I think it's a move that they're going to do, and I think next year, if they pull that off, the AFC West is going to be absolutely wild. And there's no clickbait behind it this time, because Sean Payton's actually a proven good head coach in the NFL, and now the Raiders have their quarterback. So I think that's the right move for Aaron Rodgers.
And a lot of pressure on the Chargers.
Yep.
This is the last deal for Brandon Staley. A lot of people felt that he should
have been fired after that.
Yeah, after you blow that lead, in the wild card game, but they've got some salary cap issues to deal with. And you got to maximize Justin Herbert. Hopefully their health is better, but if Rodgers goes to the AFC West, my goodness.
If he goes to the AFC West, the Chargers are probably the last seed in the AFC West, right? I mean, the Chiefs aren't on any decline coming up, I don't think. I mean, the Broncos, I think if anything, they're on the up and up, and the Chargers, I mean, like you said, they got salary issues. Can they stay healthy? Keenan Allen's not getting any younger. So, like, there's a lot of questions behind the AFC West. And I think come around this time next year, we could be really, really wrong on our predictions for the AFC West, I think.
It's funny because I put the Chargers in the Super Bowl this year, and I put them in again next year. So we're on opposite ends of it. But your points are very valid. It has the
Wait, you put the Chargers in the Super Bowl this year?
I said, George Reister and I, the week after the Super Bowl, said, all right, let's make our Super Bowl 58 predictions. And so I said Chargers Niners. That was my pick. But
I hope Dan, I'm a huge Herbert guy, and I like, if like everyone has their team, they kind of like that. I like the Chargers. They're cool, but I'm just like, man, and like the schedule is going to be hard next year too. And I picked the Chargers to make it to the Super Bowl last year as well. I thought this year was going to be their year. I mean, you bring in Khalil Mack, you have your line ready to go. You keep getting weapons for Herbert every year, whether it be a defensive player, a lineman. They brought in J.C. Jackson, and unfortunately, being the 32nd most healthy team in the league, you can't really do anything. But yeah, I just think if Aaron Rodgers goes to that division, it's going to be so much harder for the Chargers. Emmett Douglas alongside Dan Beyer on Blindside Sports, talking about the NFL offseason and Aaron Rodgers. You can get Dan on Twitter at Dan Beyer on Fox. You can hear him tomorrow and Friday on the Doug Gottlieb Show and Covino and Rich doing the updates. And you're basically Doug's kind of person he bounces topics off of. So you can hear him kind of co-hosting with Doug tomorrow and Friday. So, Dan, you have a helmet collection. Where did... I see a bunch of Fox Sports people tagging you in helmet stuff. Where did this start as a kid? Where did your interest of helmets come? The mini helmets, right?
Emmett, you got me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sorry about that. I had to step outside real quick, but and if you can hear the wind, it's pretty crazy. But
all right, we'll do this really quick so you can go inside.
Yeah, that's all right.
The mini helmets, where'd you get the interest from that from? Was it a kid thing, or was it just you like the logos? Where'd that come from?
I had always been a fan of just, uniforms and end zones from Super Bowls growing up as a kid. And it actually started in college, where me and my college roommate were collecting college football ones. But then Oregon ruined it for everybody because they were changing helmets every week, and there was no way that we could keep up. So it was a lot easier to do in the NFL because nobody was changing their helmets. And I thought, you know what? Instead of doing just the NFL, which I think a lot of people did, I tried to collect the NFL from the 1980s.
Yes.
And so I was able to get the 28 teams and at least one of the helmets that they wore at some point between 1980 and 1989. Oh, so wow. that was pretty cool. But now I've expanded it to, even the Buccaneers helmet they wore in the 90s when they won the Super Bowl with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. There's the 49ers. Do you remember the story of the 49ers changing their helmet for a day? And then
I didn't hear that. What? They did?
Yeah, they tried to change their logo, and they put a helmet up, and this is with Carmen Policy, and I think George Seifert was there. And instead of the SF, it said 49ers. Oh, and they got so much backlash for it that they decided to just keep the SF that they have on the helmet now. Well, I found somebody that made the one of that 49ers. So I actually have that 49ers helmet, of the helmet that, no, it was never worn in a game. It lasted a day, but I decided to collect that one. The Saints once wore a black helmet in the preseason of the 1960s that was not authorized by the NFL.
Oh, wow.
And so when the NFL told them that they couldn't wear it, they had to go back to their gold helmet. So the old Saints helmet was kind of a collector's item. And so I found a black one like that. So it's even kind of those one-off ones that I've collected. I have a Texans white helmet. When they first came into the league, they were going to have a white helmet, but then they switched it to navy. So that's kind of like now where it's gone. The helmet's probably over 60 helmets right now. And I'm just trying to keep growing.
That's like a whole room in your house right there.
Yeah, exactly. For sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's kind of the collector stuff because it's a good conversation starter too. And you got I see all these Fox Sports Radio people like the great Jonas Knox, which, man, I wish I brought up BKR. Oh man, we if you got time, BKR, that was awesome. If you guys don't know what BKR is, it was Jonas Knox, Dan Beyer, and John Ramos, and it started on J Moore Sports. You guys would be filling in, and that's where the John Ramos show started. And I'm not asking about the John Ramos show because he's done that. He's talked all about it on the Fenley podcast on Brian Fenley's show. So you can go check it out over there. He talked about it a while ago. So yeah, BKR, man, that I feel like that was like that was really fun. I mean, you and Jonas is one of the all-time like most hardworking, nicest people in the business, I think. And you guys were killing it for years until you got the 2 pros job doing BKR, filling in all across the network. Actually, it wasn't BKR all across the network, but BK across the network.
Yeah, it was. We had done some shows when Jay Moore left Fox Sports Radio.
Yes, you guys were the interim for
Doug Gottlieb. We were the interim, and so it's funny because we did that show for about 4 months, and then Doug Gottlieb came along, and and we knew it was always going to be a temporary sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it just we thought maybe temporary was 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and then it ended up being 4 months. But we did have a lot of fun. The funny thing is it actually started out as BTR, which people don't realize, but this was when Greg Toohey was producing the Jay Moore show. And so it was a day where I think Jay was out and Chris Plank was sitting in. And I honestly think that Plank may have come up with the BTR, and that's how it started. And then when Jonas came in, it switched over to BKR, and the rest was history.
Now that you say that, Chris Plank, that definitely sounds like something he'd come up with. Chris Plank's awesome. I mean,
he is.
You have to, obviously I'm joking, so no one take this, seriously, but sitting with Arnie 3 hours a week probably has to drive him crazy. Chris, the Dolphins, they're making the Super Bowl, man. Then next week they're giving me sports anxiety, Chris. I don't know if I can handle this. Arnie's an all-time legend as well. I mean, Fox Sports Radio, you guys have a lot of the kind of pioneers. You got Arnie, Steve Hartman, the great Andy Furman, the great Rob Parker. I wouldn't say Ben Maurer's a pioneer, but he's well known.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yep. I feel like DeSager's been all over the place too. I feel like DeSager's been in radio forever. I don't really know much about it because he's not, he doesn't tell a story like that because he's the very professional and very quiet Steve DeSager. He's there to do his job and do it good. I respect it, but
DeSager's been in the business for a while. He's been with us for about 15 years, and so like. There's a lot of guys that have been there for a long time that have, put in the work and
yep. Yeah. Ramos has been there a while too.
I think Ramos came in the 2009, 2010, around that time. So
yeah, most of the staff, I mean, Fox Sports Radio, most of you guys have been there a while. I mean, I think like the newer people are Jason Stewart and Berto and all those guys, but most of the other people are experienced veterans and have been there for. You got people like Eddie and Ben who've been there since 2000.
Yeah, I know.
So it's crazy. Dan, I really appreciate you coming on. We're gonna have to do this again. Maybe when fantasy comes on and comes closer to happening, because I know I could use some advice, and I'm sure every other person who's a fantasy guy could. So Dan, I really appreciate you coming on, man. If you enjoyed the show, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Go check out Dan's work. Are you filling in on any other shows, or are you just doing your updates for the next couple of days?
Oh, well, I'm actually going to be off on Friday. Next week, I'll be in for Doug for a couple of days, and I'm back at it on Sunday, and yeah, just ready to go.
There you go. So make sure you can hear Dan on FSR. Go check out his work. Stay tuned for fantasy season and I Want Your Flex. This has been a really good episode. Dan also be putting out some clips later of like what we talked about on here, Twitter, Insta, and TikTok. So I'll mention you in those on Twitter. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, make sure to leave a like. Thank you, Dan. See ya.
Thank you, Emmett. We'll talk to you later, man. See ya.
You too, man.